Hi, my name is Piotr, and today I'll show you the most expensive mistakes pretty much everyone does when they start making AI agents or writing AI agents. So the very first one is OpenAI slash Anthropic reliance. Zoom it in a little bit. Okay. So what I mean by that is typically, everyone that starts making AI agents, they go with either OpenAI or Anthropic, and they make their APIs keys there, and they realize that the rate limiting is so bad that within a day or so of modest usage will be blocked, right? So they panic, they don't know what to do. They request for quota. They are kind of like going into spiraling mode in terms of what to do, and they're wasting insane amount of time on something that is very simple, really. What you have to do is first on day one request higher quota with providers. This is the first thing to change. It's super simple, like 5 or 10 minutes. In fact, for my startup, I got like a response in 3 days, I believe, from OpenAI, and they maxed it out essentially. I do recommend writing an email describing what you're doing and why you believe you hit certain thresholds. So it's really just that. It depends on the provider. With Anthropic, it took me actually a few months, really. So it depends, right? But just request it via email. Super simple, 5-10 minutes, maybe 15, and you're done on this front. And the second is just use OpenRouter or any other provider like that. So there are tons of them. I think there's Nano LLM, Light LLM as well, I think, and few others. So they're all essentially doing the same things. So it is essentially a company that finds a model, routes it to multiple providers. So it's for instance, if you run a request to Nemotron 3 from NVIDIA, then they're gonna hit NVIDIA's endpoints. But if NVIDIA is down, they're gonna hit somebody else's endpoint, and so on and so forth. And OpenRouter has insanely good rate limiting policies, so you don't have to worry on this front. You're gonna save a lot of money, and really, it's super simple to change the model name if you want. So if you want experimentation and you want experimentation, then all you gotta do is essentially I'm doing it live with you guys. So all you need is essentially just copy the name, right? And within the code, it is essentially doing something like this, and that's it. Just changing the model name. So it's super simple. Definitely worth checking out. Whether it's OpenRouter, LightLM, or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but one of them. Okay, so this is one of the super important pieces. Another piece that I definitely recommend looking into is starting with the most common mistake is people start with super complex scenarios for their agents, right? So when you look at what people really need, most of the time is super simple functionality, an agent that picks up the phone, collects the details, and stores them in Google Drive or whatever, right? Or maybe just stores the information in some format that this number called presumably with these details, but LLM can get it wrong, and like this is the actionable insight. This is what most of the clients really need at the first stage, but what people end up doing instead is something like, okay, I'm gonna replace my receptionist. It's super simple. All I need is email access, our systems access, handling weird conversations, and so on and so forth. And it becomes a total nightmare I'm gonna go into that in a sec. And what you end up doing is you end up making a large agent with very complex setup that just doesn't work. And instead, what you should be doing is make something incredibly simple and small and still rely on a human to do the more difficult job. But with an agent, you're going to be able to respond 24/7, right? You're going to be able to take actionable insights if your human agent cannot respond. So it's a huge benefit at a very low cost. This is like 80% gain with 20% of effort rule, right? So to summarize, make your AI agent really simple. Just storing some information in the database first, and that's it. It may seem obvious, but it is not what most of the people are doing. Trust me. So I do recommend this one. From other cases, I'm gonna cover on the topic that I just talked about. People assume that if you give an agent the capability to create a booking in a calendar, then it's gonna work. So I'm gonna give you an example situation from my client's situation where it looked pretty much like that. Hello, can I book a meeting for myself for a dentist appointment today at 2:00? Tomorrow 2:00, right? Yes, sure, for 2:00. Agent books the meeting, and then the person says, oh shit, sorry, no, it was actually 3:00. And now you're screwed because you created an appointment. Probably LLM is not instructed well how to cancel an appointment. You would actually probably need some kind of more prompting into it, evaluating whether it works. And it becomes a total nightmare, right? So I'd put it, if I were to put it in mistake step, I'd say treating cases linearly. So it's also more complex issue that I don't want to go too deep on, but essentially there's often this step of people making AI agents squads, like on Vavi, for instance, where one part of the squad does verification, let's call it. The other part does talking about certain details. The other squad member talks about other details, right? And they are completely separate. So what happens during a conversation is somebody passes the first step, as LLM thinks person passes the second step. It transfers the conversation to the third squad member, but in reality, the person should still be talking to the second member, and now everything is broken. Nothing will work. It's a nightmare to debug. It's a nightmare to tweak the prompts, and you struggle. So for such cases, squads issue, I'd call it. The fix is quite simple, really. Start with one master agent prompt, and then optimize. So it's not recommended to start making squads because these setups are tend to be really complex. They tend to require more love being put into and a lot of testing. So I really do not recommend starting with that. Okay, covering next topic. Not testing early. So what I mean by that, I think every single client that I've had, when they showed me the agent that they have had created before, did not test it well enough, because the very first second I started talking to it, I said things like, I don't know, what do you think? And then agent went completely off the rails, suggested something that was not recommended to be suggesting, and so on and so forth. So it's very obvious whenever you're not testing your agent well enough, and wherever it's doing probably too much on its own, right? So by testing early, the typical fixes would be first human testing, right? Human testing, second automated testing. So on this front, there are new frameworks popping up every now and then. You have Langfuse, which is pretty cool. You have many other companies working on that. What I did in my examples, I usually took the transcripts from actual conversations and just created a very simple system where I asked LLM to behave like the person from the transcript, and I'd see if the tool calls were being used properly, if the flow looks correct. This would be done via like a how to say that, via automated LLM evaluation, right? So the idea would be that on Git commit, I'd be able to test regressions easily. So this is a little bit more complex setup. You might not have to do it, but it depends on the use case, obviously. However, the very first step of human testing and testing at every single prompt change is absolutely necessary. And I see so many cases where it simply hasn't been done properly, especially with banks where there are so many different edge cases and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is incredibly costly mistake because you spend money on every developer iteration, you spend money on bugs being found and looked upon by humans and so on and so forth. So I really recommend putting a lot of love into this point. Another one that I have is not having an observation pipeline. So it is very strongly connected to the previous one, but it is slightly different. So one is automated testing to see whenever something breaks, but the other is really understanding the flow of the calls, whether they're going into the right direction. And there's also a lot of improvements on this front. Also, Langfuse, many other companies doing something similar. And this usually helps you also understand your cost structure a lot more. It helps you understand whether your LLM is too stupid, or maybe you could actually make it a little bit more stupid, but much more cheaper, and things like that. You can also understand more about why customers don't like your AI. Maybe it's the text-to-speech you're using, and you can kind of extract these clues from the transcripts, and using observability pipeline, you can maybe see that for the conversations where the latency was huge, for them the drop rate for the calls was huge. So not having a tool like that means you're making decisions blindly. You're just okay, I'm gonna change this, and you have no idea whether it's gonna work. And to give a real life example, in my case, I've had a situation where the biggest cost was the telephony provider, and I would never guess it. I honestly was super convinced it would be either LLM provider or the text-to-speech or the provider VAPI that I was using in general. And I was wrong on all three occasions, and having observation pipeline helped me understand it. Without it, it would be, a blind guess. So it's a very, very, very important step that saved thousands of dollars for my situation. And one other step that I have, one last step that I have, I actually have had 7. One was also testing, automated testing. One was observation pipeline, and one was not testing early, but I'll make those 3 points into 2. It's very similar. And the last one is making a asking agents to do too much. So this is definitely not obvious, but as the call goes, usually the quality of the LLM drops. So every single LLM has this issue that after a certain amount of messages, the tool calling accuracy drops. So overall conversation quality drops, right? And there are many cases where an agent is asked to perform many operations, sometimes quite complex ones, requiring understanding of nuances of business. And what happens is you end up having a very difficult scenario to test and a very difficult scenario to handle because you need some additional context engineering. What you typically need to do is somehow erase previous part of the conversation, summarize it, and essentially create a new conversation with previous context injected at the beginning. And this is something that is not always super simple. It is something that is quite annoying to work on because it involves a lot of iterations and a lot of human testing, really. And it's also difficult to get to a part where the context becomes a problem. So there's a lot of nuances in here. What happens when the conversation gets longer? And in general, it tends to happen when agent is simply doing a lot of work, right? If the goal of your product is to make something super simple and ideally transfer to human when there is a certain risky action performed, then making the constraints on the system helps you a lot, and it's actually one of the most underestimated points, I think, in this whole list in terms of costliness, because you initially fall into this trap of assuming, oh, I'm very close to getting it right. There's only certain type of conversation on which we're failing. You make a prompt adjustment or the tools adjustment or system, etc. And it turns out you actually hit a regression and something else fails, right? And you keep on fixing things like that for a long time, and you don't really get the benefit at all from such actions. Whereas if you started from something super simple, like I said at the very beginning, let's just collect the details, then you would be like, oh, okay, it's actually useful in this scenario. Then I can add on top of it rather than trying to eat the whole cake at once, right? So in my experience, all of these mistakes are done by everyone. So I have had all of these cases in the past where I did all of these mistakes, not having a proper pipeline in the first place, not testing regressions early, all of them. And every single person I talked to did the same mistakes. So for the future, do not make them, right? Now you know. You're smarter than I was when I started. And I hope it helps you out. It definitely saved my clients a lot of dollars, a lot of work hours, and hopefully you'll find it useful as well. I'm Piotr. I work on voice AI, and in general, I work closely with LLMs, and I hope you liked it. See you next time.